Welcome to Saorsa Live Podcasting, the team podcast of the Saorsa digital campaigning team. Tonight was our first experiment in creating a podcast from a live stream on TikTok. Please forgive us for all the technical errors and also if we ramble on too much. Apart from that, I think it went quite well. Dave and Kareem are both very knowledgeable and confident when it comes to discussing Scottish independence, and it was a joy to be live with them. Expect more podcasts made from our lives, perhaps even better ones, when we get to know our trade a bit better. You can find all of Saorsa's podcasts on saorsascot.com/podcasts. Now then, shall we get on with it? So the question is Scotland taken seriously by the unionist status quo? And the status quo is basically the UK government, really, and it can be on both sides of the fence. And I did some talking points in the Discord as well for us, so we can go back. We can think of the question when we say that. What's the first thing that springs to your mind? When somebody asks, "Is Scotland taken seriously by the unionist status quo?"
Well, there's a one-word answer to that, and that is no.
Absolutely, I don't think that they're taken seriously. They like to think that they're taken seriously. They take us seriously, or they like to give the impression with that. But truly, in the real world, I don't think they do. To be perfectly honest, either. So, can you give me examples, just a couple of examples of how you feel they don't take us seriously?
They're just totally dismissive of any arguments we put forward.
Mm-hmm.
Completely dismissive of it, even when there's clear evidence to back up what we're saying.
Yeah.
They completely dismiss it.
They do, and one of the talking points I put down is basically it's always Scotland bad in the press. It's we're mocked in the unionist press. Lies are told about our politicians. It's always bad. Things are worse in Westminster, but Westminster's never held to the same level of account as the Scottish politics is.
And another thing that I have noticed is, especially with Rishi Sunak and Hamza Youssef,
Mm-hmm.
is they're very quick to call out Hamza Youssef into account for saying things. But when it comes to the likes of the Tories, and as I mentioned him, Rishi Sunak, and Anna Saorsa, they're very slow.
Well, that's just it, really. It's called hypocrisy. It's called jobs for the boys. It's called Scotland bad, and everything that we've just said there just now. It's childish, to be perfectly honest. If you want my honest opinion, I've got a few more actual examples of when they don't take us seriously. So, if you remember back, was it 2022? Boris Johnson prorogued Parliament illegally, and that was found in the courts to be illegal. And our representation, it was one of our MPs up here that was part of the team that took Boris Johnson and the UK government to court for proroguing illegally, and we won. And she was mocked and ridiculed, and in the press and threatened in the press as well, right across the whole spectrum. And I feel that that's totally unjustified. Would they have done the same thing to a UK status quo unionist party member? Well, it took Scottish MPs to actually take them to court, if you remember, in the first place, to instigate that. So,
yeah. There's even a more recent example of how Scotland was treated with contempt in Parliament.
Yeah.
And that was the SNP's Opposition Day.
That's right. I've got that as part of the the talking points as well. That's one of the most recent things, and it wasn't even the body of the government that went about doing that, was it? It was the straight up opposition party that went that way in the first place. You know, it's incredible to think that a party which is opposing the Tories, that should be the opposite of everything, is probably more close to the Tories than other opposition parties within there as a whole. You know, Kareem's just come in. Good evening, Kareem. How are you?
Hi, I'm well, thank you. Sadly, I won't be able to stay too long,
That's
but
okay.
I'll contribute the best I can for the moment.
No problem at all. That's okay. We're basically just skirting around the edges of the topics that I put up in the Discord for this, and it's more of an experiment tonight in actually recording a podcast. See who would be interested, see who would enjoy doing it as well. So we'll use this as a massive learning tool, and we'll publish it, and we'll get feedback from people as well, just to see what they think, which I think is quite important, to be perfectly honest, because we can only get better at doing these things with practice, especially with other projects that are coming up in the future as well. Now, where is my little Discord button here just now? I am not feeling very awake just now. So yeah, David just brought up the talking point of the Opposition Day disaster as one of the points of Scotland not being taken seriously by the status quo as a whole. What do you feel about that, Kareem?
I think there's a lot of evidence regarding that when you look to see the amount of times that we've been laughed at within Westminster when our politicians have been speaking. And you can see that with the Tory party within the Scottish Parliament as well, that, their attitude is that the Parliament should be closed, so I think anything that Scotland doesn't get taken very serious. And I would like people here to actually to stand up and to recognise this. Why is it that there's a fog that seems to come over people's eyes when it comes to things that Westminster does, but if it was closer to home, then that's when they want to cause civil war, you know?
No, I agree. It's at the end of the day, they just want to ignore us, and if they feel if they ignore us, we might just go away, you know, and they can continue with the status quo and keep it going all the time. I mean, there's many
Look
other
at
things.
it.
Pardon? On you go.
Look at an example with the amount of, I mean, just look at the amount of MPs that England has alone compared to Scotland's 57, or is it 40 in Wales? And I might get that mixed up with Northern Ireland, so it's one or the other. How can we have a voice down in the English Parliament when, it's so overruled with English MPs? And of course, we'll be laughed at and talked down. And I mean, our own MPs from up here with Labour and Lib Dem and Tories are joining in with their fellow colleagues, laughing at SNP or ALBA. And it's quite alarming to see that that's their opinion, and it hurts. It shouldn't be happening.
No, I totally agree. It feels like democracy is only for the unionist parties and not for the Scottish MPs or the Scottish MSPs. It's like an illusion of democracy, and it's a massive democratic deficit. And you know, at the end of the day, some people might argue, well, that's just the way that the constituencies are broken up, and I get that. You know, I get that, but we should still be able to make decisions for our own country, our own nation, our own people that have some substance, and not have them trodden over by, as you're saying, the English Parliament, the English MPs. And it's tragic that that's the case. Things will change. They will change. I mean, maybe our generation will push it forward, Kareem. I'd love to see independence in my lifetime, but the polls show that the young people of Scotland, they want independence. And I mean, we're talking over 80% of 16 to 25-year-olds want it. and the next generation, coming up from there, they'll want it too. So it's inevitable that it's going to happen. It's just that they're going to hold on for as long as possible. Dave, what do you feel about the opposition day stuff as well? Please just throw your tuppence in, please.
Well, I was absolutely disgusted by what happened.
Okay, and hang on, what happened there? Where did you go to? Did I mute you? Did you mute yourself, Dave? Hold on. What has happened? Are we still on?
I didn't mute myself, but somehow it put me on mute.
That's okay.
First of all, I was absolutely disgusted by what took place.
Mm-hmm.
But the fact that Sakir Starmer pulled that stunt,
Yeah.
and the fact that Chris Hoyle, the Speaker, went along with that.
Well, I mean, he is the whole topic of the opposition day debate was to have a cohesive discussion about a ceasefire in Palestine, and we know that Labour is friends with Israel and part of an organisation, Labour Friends of Israel, and we know that the Speaker of the House's dad was one of the founder members of Labour Friends of Israel, so they're going to do everything they can to distract, distort, and push that whole discussion away. And they did. They were very successful at using sort of grey area rules to circumvent the SNP's opposition day. I mean, that's totally historic what happened there, you know?
Because I was under the impression that under parliamentary rules, yes, the government have a right to put an amendment in, but the other opposition parties don't have. Am I wrong about that?
I don't know. I'm not too sure about the parliamentary rules. I mean, if you've read them and that's what they state, maybe that's the rules that the speaker broke. I mean, I found that whole thing surprising. I found the best. It was I watched the whole thing live, the whole discussion live, it all unfold. Started to Google things so I understood things better, and then the SNP, with a whole bunch of Tories as well, actually walked out of the Parliament, and quite rightly so as well. I mean, what else are they supposed to do? What else can they do with that?
Another comment I got about that is I've seen better behaved school kids.
Well, that's what it is, though, isn't it? It is a boys' club. It's a schoolboys' club. I use the term old suits or old boots and dusty suits to describe the attitudes of the politicians down there, especially the old school politicians. It's one of the only parliaments that you get up off your butt and walk through doors to be counted as a vote. Most parliaments and government bodies now vote electronically on a closed loop system. You know, I just don't get it. They need to modernise because it's an absolute joke. We'll move on to another talking point though. Back when the Parliament was prorogued in 2022, it was to kind of hide the Brexit stuff that was going on at the time. And Scotland, as we know, we didn't vote to leave the EU at all. And people still, in comments and across Instagram, YouTube, Twitter, and here on TikTok as well, turn around and say, get over it. It was a democratic vote. We voted as a country. He says, no. The union voted, but we turned around and decided that we didn't want to go. So did Northern Ireland. But because more council areas, more votes are counted, with the democratic deficit that Scotland is on the wrong side of, we got pulled out of the EU. And we can see how tragic that has become for Scotland, well, the whole set of islands as a whole. And I remember it happening. I remember what I did is I voted to remain quite happily. I was quite happy being part of the EU. And I didn't fall for any of the brainwashing propaganda about it being a bureaucratic nonsense. Yeah, but you've got more chance of, if it is, you've got more chance of changing that if you're on the inside as opposed to the outside. You're just going to come up against more bureaucracy from the outside to try and do things with the people from the inside. And that's what we're feeling. And, excuse me, we were still taken out. I just think it was just a rich man's scam to do disaster capitalism and make a fast buck. And that seems to be what's happened, to be perfectly honest. Kareem, how did you feel about Brexit? I don't know how you voted. I don't know how you feel about it as a whole, um, and how you feel about it now. And
I, for me, Brexit's been one of the most expensive mistakes that the UK has made, and I agree completely where it's a bunch of rich people to save themselves money instead of having to declare it, which was one of the new rules
yeah,
under the EU that was about to kick in. For me, I'd be asking the question, if you're a unionist in Scotland, then you can see, why does Northern Ireland have special privileges and still have a lot of links and trade, etc., with the EU, and Scotland doesn't? You know, Northern Ireland is doing pretty well with a lot of things now, and or Scotland, as you can see, more and more and more of our resources is getting used up. Or Grangemouth is to close, and you know, it's as if they're moving forward, but Scotland is moving backwards. And what's really, I can't fathom if that's the word, is why are people accepting that here? You know, it's as if it's recently I wrote a blog and I said it's like the unicorn has been chained and it's now tamed. And that should not ever be the case. And there's so much wrong going ons that are occurring towards Scotland, and the people here are just accepting it. We need to stand up and to face the challenges that are coming, especially under Starmer.
absolutely. No, I think you nailed it right there. Why have Northern Ireland got special privileges? Why are we walking backwards all the time because of Brexit? Why are we feeling the bite? It's as if they're sort of wanting to like wear us down and make us reliant on the broad shoulders of the union. And let me just say just now, just as a wee interjecture just now, okay, and I'm just going to put this up here. If you want to read any of the blogs done by any of the guys here, it's sursascott.com/blog, and you can go and read Kareem's stuff, my stuff, Robert's stuff, and Dr. Rob's stuff as well, which is great. I've got 4 writers on there. I'm not saying that we are literary geniuses, but it's definitely worth reading just to experience our opinions and how we feel about things. Definitely worth doing. So go and have a wee look at sursascott.com/blog, and you'll be able to actually read Kareem's blog, which is great. Okay, yeah, so going back to what we're talking about, Northern Ireland, they have special privileges. Scotland's walking backwards. It does not seem to be going forward, and people in Scotland are accepting that. That's quite frightening. That's almost like a cult like behaviour, accepting like deliberate punishment upon yourself for what they feel is the greater good of their masters. It's so downtrodden, it's so serf like to accept this. And we feel the crappy end of that stick constantly in Scotland. And it's a damn shame because we're so much better than that. And I feel it's going to take something god awful to happen up here. Worse than Brexit, worse than the COVID, worse than, I don't know, Margaret Thatcher, dare I say it as well. And that could be Keir Starmer's Labour. You know, it could be that pushes people to that as a whole. But then I worry because of the comments that I see. Are these bots? Are these genuine people that are commenting, terrible things in other people's comments? Especially when it's a unionist versus a pro-indie person. Why are people like that? Why do people accept this? Dave, have you got any opinions on that at all?
It for me, it just shows the contempt that people have for Scotland. It really does. But going back to your thing about Brexit, there's 2 things I remember about Brexit. One involves Northern Ireland, actually.
Mm-hmm.
Well, first of all, you had Theresa May. Well, first of all, there was a broken promise from 2014 because we were promised that would not happen.
Yeah.
And secondly, under Theresa May's government, when the negotiations started, it was stated by the then government that no part of the United Kingdom would be given a separate deal from the rest.
That's true as well.
And again, that's what happened.
That whole thing is, it's like, you go back to 2014, and you've even just the simplest bit of propaganda, the vow and the promises made on the vow. Now, some people will argue that the vow's been fulfilled. Some people will argue that the vow's not been fulfilled. I feel that parts of it have been kind of tried to be fulfilled, but failed. I just don't feel right about that. I feel that that only came out to when basically Scotland's opinion polls hit 53% for yes back in 2014. If you remember, when that opinion poll happened, they sent every single senior politician from every party up to Scotland to do a walk around. And then the vow came out in the Daily Record, and with all their signatures of the party leaders from the unionist parties. And when we voted when we voted to remain inside the union, the very next day it was announced for that evil thing, English votes for English matters. Is that what it was? Was it
English votes for English laws?
English votes for English laws, where basically only English MPs could vote for English laws, but then English MPs could still be part of the voting for Scottish laws. The contempt just in that alone should have had massive alarm bells ringing across for everybody. But you find that the status quo unionists up here in Scotland are laughing about that. They're laughing at their own slavery, and that is just a shame. I feel embarrassed with these people sometimes, as a whole.
Is evil still a thing?
I don't think it is anymore. I think it was put out, but it's part of history. It's like, yeah, we'll give you the vow, we'll give you all this, but something, we're just going to vote for our own stuff, and we can vote for your stuff. It's that whole contemptuous sort of attitude that the Parliament had. I don't think it's around anymore. I don't think so at all. I think it's going to remain a theme about the disbelief that people in Scotland can accept and enjoy the fact that they're treated with contempt. I don't get that. Are we not a proud people? Are we not a proud people, Kareem? I think we are.
I think it always comes back to what I say. You can't fix stupid. We've got so
Yeah.
many people up here that have, they are, as what you're saying, they're happy to be treated like idiots. Or it's the other end of the other side of the coin for me is I'm all right, Jack, so I don't care about anybody else.
Yeah.
Until something starts to affect them, then they'll stamp their feet demanding handouts from SNP while trying to vote them out. So for me, at the end of the day, that's what we that's the dark side of Scotland. When you look at, if you were to fly away and look at Scotland from abroad, then we've got all the strong, we've got the beauty, the scenery, Loch Ness, and we've got proud people. But that's, for the world to see the tourist aspect. When you actually look at Scotland, and you're completely right, we've got half of Scotland, willing to take the nonsense from down south, laughing at all the stuff that's happening, making them look like fools, and going along with it. I don't understand that, and I just feel, as Alex Salmon said in 2014, we have to have the confidence. We need to stand up and believe in ourselves. And so many, and maybe is this an elder generation thing that just don't believe in that? Not everybody, not to be saying it's all elderly, but I don't know. It baffles me. It really, really does.
I'm on the same boat as you. They're pulling the same word. I don't understand what in the first place why are people in a country, in a nation, with so much going for it, as in Scotland, all right, would want to not would want to remain as part of an organisation, a union that fleeces them, that pirates them, that pimps them, all these horrible things, just takes the piss out of them for money, resources, and then makes you feel crappy about it on top of it. Not only are they stealing from us, but then they belittle us on top of that as well. I mean, is that not the essence of a toxic relationship? Is that not the essence of a toxic marriage, a broken down relationship as a whole? I mean, can you imagine if we did that to the rest of the UK? It would just not be right. We would be a pariah state. It would just be awful as a whole. I've got about another 10 talking points that we could go through tonight. I'm not going to go through them all, but I do want to just quickly go to the side chat here just now, because Saul said, I don't know whether Saul's still on in the side chat, but he said something that was quite pertinent, that's relevant to this as well. People are scared of what they never experienced. I'd imagine that's why Scotland voted to remain in the UK, basically, and that's a valid point. I mean, we could argue and discuss the pros and cons about why people voted to stay in the union. I mean, there's lots of arguments about vote rigging, lots of arguments about constant brainwashing and stuff like that. But what you have to remember is we started round about 20% when that campaign started, and we got over 50%. For one day we reached 53%, and then when the vote happened it was round about 45%, and since then it's kind of remained at 50-50. So that tells you something. We're a bit polarised. I believe it's a lot more than 50%. I really do. I feel that it's a greater number than 50%. I think the polls kind of might be a bit skewed. And they're just a snapshot of a reaction of something that's happened anyway. But round about that 50%, okay, can you imagine right now, I'm going to put this just now to you guys, can you imagine starting a campaign for independence right now, sitting even at 48% yes and 52% no? The big guns would come out, the media would be all over it saying Scotland bad, but that is the only argument the status quo of the union actually has. Scotland bad, Scotland can't do anything, deficit, pensions, all the toxic, scary things that they like to talk about. But I reckon that we would win it because our arguments are far more stronger, they're full of substance, and they're genuinely actually more realistic. How do you feel about that, Dave?
Well, I'm not a lover of polls anyway.
Okay.
I have to admit. Because to me there's too many things that can influence them. But one thing I can guarantee, and I'm being positive when I say when we get another referendum, it's almost guaranteed that Westminster will send the big guns up.
Yeah.
Guaranteed.
They'll just unload a broadside of toxic media upon us constantly, and we'll probably feel the same sort of algorithm suppressing across social media anything that's remotely pro-Scottish. That's why we need to be fighting now constantly for it. What do you feel about that, Kareem? Do you feel starting a campaign around about 50-50 that we've got more of a chance with the fact that we actually have a campaign of substance?
I think people like ourselves should be prepared more now than what we were back then because we know what to expect. So that comes down to the planning, but that will also come down to SNP. And, although down south sent up the MPs and you've seen them coming through Central Station, and there was a cyclist with the Darth Vader Star Wars tune and shouting funny things out at them. That should be stuff the SNP should be doing up and down the country, getting their MSPs, getting their councillors, getting their MPs, and getting them out for those 4 or 6 weeks of the campaigning. I think for the rest, we should be using tactics as well. Everything that you've said, that what they're doing, Scotland, that bad, the media, X, Y, and Z, this was all done when India tried to leave. and they used all these bully boy tactics, and India stood up and rose against it. And I think if that's not evidence in itself, that if people were to just do a wee Google search to see all the things that what the Empire, Westminster and so forth did at that time, it's exact same what's happening now. It's just obviously a bit more modern times, but it's the same bully boy, scary tactics. India, take my hat off. They weren't having it. Sadly to say, half of them up here, regardless whatever happens to them, they could be thrown out in the street. They would still go running, to the Westminster establishment. Thank you for giving me that road, that street to be on. That's the mentality. But I'm waffling on here. Basically, my point is, I think we know what to expect, and if we plan and make sure that our planning is accurate and getting the right tools out there, then we should be more than prepared for the crap that they're going to throw at us.
Yeah, it's preparation's key. On you go, Dave, sorry.
Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt there. The same thing has happened with India. Prior to, or after that happened with Malta.
That's
They
true.
used exactly the same arguments against Malta as they used against Scotland. The only difference was Malta didn't fall for it.
And Malta are quite a successful nation, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, they are. They're very successful.
And they don't have the same things going for them as Scotland has, as a whole. Listen, this has been really good fun tonight, just talking away. I'm conscious that it's definitely only a Thursday night and some of us have work in the morning. I mean, I could talk for hours and hours about this, but there's still like about 15 talking points that we could go through, but I think we should save them for another time. And just say in the side chat just now, Ian said that Malta have sunshine. This is true. Scotland doesn't have nearly as much sunshine as Malta does, but we do have great scenery, great mountains, great whiskey, and a lot going for great food, great people. We just need to start believing in ourselves a little bit more. We need to start looking at every time somebody says Scotland bad, why are they saying that? And then say, no, Scotland's good. And then look at their argument and say, and find why they're saying it's bad. And I guarantee you, the root of most of the comments that people, when they have that Scotland bad thing, will go straight back down to the way that the unions treated us as a whole. I feel that that's probably the strongest argument, and it's used as an excuse. And this, we'll come on the talking points. Just finish up on this little bit discussion just now. When we sort of when our politicians turn around and blame the union for certain aspects, like let's say the block grant, we can't put enough money into the NHS because the block grant that we're receiving is less. Okay, that is Scotland's fault. How is it our fault when the block grant is calculated on a system of per head of population in the UK? So if England spend less on the NHS, the same percentage drops for per head of population in Scotland. So straight up, they spend less, we get less money. It becomes our fault because of that. And we then turn around and say, well, no, it's because we're getting this. Oh, you're just blaming the union for everything. And that's another mentality thing. How do you think that we should combat that? How do you combat that, gentlemen?
By doing what some of us are trying to do. Show facts.
That's great. That's exactly what we need to do.
I think what you just said there, in a simpler version on a little meme or poster, and let someone read it, if they're that thick enough not to understand after it or still believe that, the opposite, I'm not being negative, it just comes back to you can't fix stupid. What you've just said there is a perfectly reasonable explanation. Yeah, and okay, I accept that then. But if there's people that are, no, I don't accept that, blah, 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 those people there's no getting over to them. It really doesn't matter anything that Scotland manages to do. We could have the best at something, and they would still find the darkness, the negativity out of it. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's not going to change that type of person and how they think. It's not going to happen.
Great. Listen, gentlemen, thank you very much for just jumping on. Considering that we just talked about doing this as a wee experiment earlier on the Discord, I think the experiments worked quite well. Being able to discuss things quite amicably. The side chat's been very friendly, so thank you everybody that's contributed in the side chat today as well. I think that one of the funniest things I've actually read, and that was Ian's comment about having sunshine in Malta. So thank you very much for that, Ian. And we will definitely, with experience and a massive learning curve about how to do these things, like me pushing the record button before we start speaking. I got like 99% of everything. I got everything from when Dave came on forward, but I didn't get my countdown or anything, which I use for editing purposes. But those sort of things, that's me with my technical side. That's me having to learn. But listen, Dave, thank you very much. Kareem, thank you very much. We will be doing more of these, most definitely, and we will be recording them all, and we will be sticking them up on our website as podcasts. And I'm going to do that right now with this one. So, gentlemen, thank you so much for tonight. I really appreciate it.
Good night, everybody. Good night.
Good night.
Good night.
And I will now just switch off the boxes. Let me just go to multi-guest, and we'll switch them off. Where is end multi-guest? Oh my God, I'm rubbish at this.